Have you ever felt that the more available you are, the less you're respected? You give, you show up, you stay present, yet somehow your presence starts to feel expected, even invisible. It's a quiet erosion, one the wise have always guarded against. The most powerful figures in history, emperors, philosophers, and modern giants alike, understood one thing: too much visibility dissolves influence. It's not arrogance, it's discipline. Machiavelli hinted at it. The Stoics lived by it, because true power doesn't beg to be seen. It chooses when to appear and when to disappear. In this video, we'll explore why restraint speaks louder than noise, why presence without boundaries becomes cheap, and how strategic silence can command more than constant visibility ever could. If you've ever wondered why some people are followed and others are forgotten, stay with me. The answer isn't in doing more, it's in doing less with clarity. The power of strategic absence. There's something oddly magnetic about the person you don't see often. They walk into the room and suddenly everyone is alert. Their presence feels elevated, almost sacred. Why? Because scarcity builds value. In The Prince, Niccolò Machiavelli understood this deeply. A man who is esteemed is not easily conspired against. But here's the part. Many misesteem isn't built through constant presence. In fact, it's the opposite. Show up too much, be too available, and you become part of the background noise. People stop looking for you. They stop listening. Familiarity erodes mystery, and mystery, as Machiavelli knew, is where power sleeps. It's not about hiding. It's about choosing when to appear. It's about showing up at moments of meaning when your presence commands attention, not when it begs for it. Strategic absence isn't about withdrawing from the world in bitterness or fear. It's about deliberate positioning. The Stoics would call it acting with intention. You don't need to vanish to be respected, but you do need to stop being common. You need to detach from the need to always be seen, always be heard, always be in the room, because when people get used to your presence, they stop valuing it. And when that happens, your influence fades, not because you changed, but because you became too familiar. Machiavelli saw this clearly. A ruler who is always accessible loses his mystique. He becomes open to attack, to gossip, to games of politics. He no longer feels larger than life. He feels like everyone else. And in politics, in life, and in relationships, that's when the knives come out. But if you appear rarely and powerfully when your timing is sharp, when your energy is calm, and when your silence speaks louder than their noise, you earn something far rarer than popularity. You earn reverence. Stoic wisdom aligns with this. Epictetus taught that our worth is not measured by the applause we receive, but by our ability to remain centered regardless of it. You don't build respect by shouting for it. You build it by becoming the kind of person whose absence is noticed more than most people's constant noise. There is weight in stillness. There is gravity in silence. And there is immense power in restraint. But make no mistake, strategic absence doesn't mean you abandon your responsibilities or play games. It means you detach from the need for constant validation. You pull back so that your words hit harder. You withdraw so that when you speak, people lean in. Like a great leader, you know that your presence is a currency. Spend it too freely and it becomes worthless. Spend it wisely, and people will remember every time you enter the room. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice." The best proof of power, in the same way, is not to announce it, but to move through the world as though you don't need to prove it. People chase attention when they lack direction, but the Stoic man, the Machiavellian mind. They understand that power is not in being seen everywhere. It's in being missed. It's in people asking, where is he not? Why is he always here? So stop showing up to everything. Stop explaining yourself constantly. Stop posting every move, reacting to every message, or being the first to respond. Become elusive, not evasive. Quiet, not passive. Present, but unpredictable. When you master the art of restraint, when your presence feels earned, not expected, you won't need to chase power. It will begin to orbit around you, because the most dangerous man in the room is never the loudest one. It's the one whose silence carries weight, the one who doesn't show up often, but when he does, everything changes. When stillness becomes power, long before Machiavelli, another voice from the East understood the silent mechanics of power. Lao Tzu, in the Tao Te Ching, whispered a truth the modern world still struggles to grasp. The sage stays behind. Thus, he is ahead. His words weren't about surrender or timidity. They spoke to a deeper strength, the kind that doesn't demand attention, but draws it in without force. The essence of his philosophy was restraint, not absence of action, but the discipline to act less, and to act with intention. In his world, real influence didn't announce itself. It lingered quietly in the background, shaping outcomes without noise. This, in many ways, mirrors the heart of Stoic thinking. True strength doesn't need spectacle, it needs clarity. The more we withdraw from the compulsion to be seen, the more powerfully we are felt. This isn't about playing games or pretending to be unavailable. It's about understanding that presence loses its meaning when it's constant. Just as water loses its taste when it's everywhere, so does our influence when we never step back. When you're always the first to respond, always saying yes, always showing up, you dilute your impact. Familiarity doesn't just breed contempt, it breeds invisibility. People stop appreciating what they can always access, but disappear, even slightly, and you awaken something ancient in them: curiosity. The mind cannot ignore a question mark. When you're not immediately accessible, others are forced to wonder, to imagine, to reflect on your value. In that distance, you become larger. You're no longer just a presence, they start to perceive you as a principle. Modern psychology affirms what Stoics and sages already knew. Robert Cialdini's scarcity principle shows that we assign more value to what's rare. Human beings are wired to want what's slipping away, to desire what they can't easily obtain. The ever-present becomes mundane. The subtly elusive becomes magnetic. And the irony is, the less you offer yourself, the more others seek you out. It's a paradox, but it's also a power move, because silence, space, and occasional absence make your energy feel earned, not owed. And in a world obsessed with attention, there is nothing more powerful than someone who doesn't need it. You've seen this dynamic in your own life. The friend who always says yes, always shows up, always makes time at some point. You begin to expect them, not appreciate them. Their kindness fades into the background. It becomes assumed, not acknowledged. But then there's that one person who doesn't always say yes, who sometimes declines, who holds their time sacred. When they do show up, their presence feels significant. Their words land heavier. Their attention feels like a gift, not a habit. And that's where respect is born, not from frequency, but from intentionality. The Stoics would call this clarity of action. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that everything we do should be done as if it were the last act of our life. That includes when we speak, when we show up, and when we disappear. A wise man doesn't make himself scarce to provoke admiration. He does it to preserve meaning. to ensure that when he acts, he's not reacting, he's leading. When he speaks, it's not to fill silence, but to bring weight. And when he steps away, it's not to hide, it's to return stronger. So stop apologizing for your boundaries. Stop fearing what people might think if you don't show up every time they call. Your value isn't proven through availability, it's proven through discernment. When you learn to be deliberate with your presence, you stop being taken for granted. You start becoming unforgettable. And in that subtle shift, from always being there to sometimes stepping back, you don't lose relevance, you gain reverence. That's not passive, that's strategic, that's stoic. How legends vanish to rise. History is full of men who understood a truth too many forget. In our hypervisible age, the less you are seen, the more you are revered. In the 17th century, Louis XIV of France, known as the Sun King, embodied this with masterful precision. He turned his court at Versailles into a living theatre where he was both protagonist and mystery. Everything revolved around him, yet he was rarely accessible. His days were choreographed like rituals. His waking, his meals, even his walks were carefully stage-managed. Yet despite this constant orbit of attention, actual audiences with him were rare, and that rarity, engineered and intentional, transformed every encounter with him into something sacred. The nobles didn't just serve him, they obsessed over his glances, dissected his silences, and read volumes into a single nod. In doing less, he achieved more. By staying just out of reach, he became untouchable, not only in status, but in perception. This wasn't coincidence, it was strategy. The king understood what the Stoics taught long before, that power is not shown through noise, but through restraint. He didn't flood the room with his presence. He allowed space for mystique, and in that space, admiration bloomed. Because people do not crave what they already possess, they crave what they can't fully grasp. This philosophy of absence as strength wasn't just confined to palaces and courts, it extended into the brutal clarity of warfare. Consider Subutai, the legendary Mongol general and one of Genghis Khan's deadliest minds. He didn't just win battles, he made fear itself a weapon. His genius was in his vanishing act. Armies would march against him, only to find he wasn't there. He evaporated into mountains, into deserts, into rumor, and then, at the precise moment when enemies relaxed or turned their backs, he struck with terrifying force. His armies didn't just conquer, they haunted. His absence became a psychological campaign all its own. The fear of what could not be seen became more powerful than the armies that could. He didn't just outfight his enemies, he outthought them. He mastered the battlefield of perception. And that's the deeper Stoic principle at play. Here, control what you can control and relinquish the rest. But what you can control, how you present yourself, how often you reveal yourself, when and why you show up, matters more than most realize. Louis XIV controlled his time like a scarce currency. Subutai controlled his movements like a shadow on a map. Both of them weaponized restraint. Both of them understood what we often forget. Your presence is powerful only when it's not taken for granted. In the modern world, we're encouraged to always be visible. Post more, say more, show up constantly. But in doing so, we erode the very thing we're trying to build: respect. Attention without scarcity becomes noise. Presence without intention becomes invisible. And the man who is always seen eventually becomes background. But the one who appears with purpose, who lets silence do the talking, who knows that mystique is not a weakness, but a tool, he becomes unforgettable. So learn from kings and generals. Pull back, not because you fear being forgotten, but because you understand how memory works. People remember what they miss. They value what they rarely receive, appear less not to disappear, but to rise above the noise. That's not avoidance. That's power in its most stoic form, restrained, intentional, and quietly unstoppable. The perils of overexposure. There's a quiet tragedy in being seen too often. Take Napoleon Bonaparte, a man of brilliance, command, and mythic ambition. Yet even he became a cautionary tale about the cost of overexposure. After his first exile to Elba, he returned with thunder riding on legacy, charisma, and momentum. But the second act, his so-called 100 days, collapsed quickly, not because he lacked genius, not because he'd grown weak, but because the people remembered too much. His mistakes, his ambition, his humanity, they hadn't faded into legend yet. He returned before absence could ripen into myth. Familiarity clouded awe. Instead of being remembered as the conqueror of Europe, he became a man who came back too soon. Reverence, like flame, needs space to breathe. Nietzsche once warned, "He who fights with monsters should see to it that he himself does not become a monster." But he also hinted at a quieter danger. When greatness is constantly on display, it ceases to feel great. Even the extraordinary, when offered too freely, begins to feel routine. It's not that we stop recognizing brilliance, it's that we stop feeling it. The mind dulls, the heart stops stirring. Icons lose their glow when they flood our feed. Legends erode into personalities, and even the divine, if never cloaked in shadow, becomes common. Mystery, then, is not decoration. It's necessity. The artist who vanishes after one transcendent album burns brighter in memory than the one who never stops releasing. The lover who doesn't always text back sparks more wonder than the one who never stops talking. The stoic leader, like a seasoned strategist, chooses his words slowly, deliberately, because every pause builds tension, and every silence holds weight. It is in what is withheld that power begins to accumulate. The space between appearances, the gaps in communication, those are not weaknesses. They are where gravity forms. Modern psychology affirms what the ancients intuited. A study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology showed that people rate others as more attractive when they're slightly less available, not cold or aloof, but unpredictable enough to awaken curiosity. That hint of uncertainty, that subtle signal that someone values their own time, isn't just intriguing, it's magnetic. Even animals understand this. Watch the alpha wolf. It doesn't bark constantly. It doesn't fight to prove its dominance. It moves with calm, decisive energy. It shows up when necessary, then disappears just as quickly. Its silence is its authority. Its restraint is its control. We live in a world that tells you to be everywhere, to speak often, to respond instantly, to keep showing up. But if you want to be respected, truly respected, you must do the opposite. You must learn to hold yourself back, to speak less, but mean more, to appear rarely, but move deeply. That is the Stoic's path, not one of emotional withdrawal, but of intentional restraint, because power isn't in how loud you are. It's in how wisely you use your presence. Appear too often, and you become expected, but appear rightly at moments of purpose. With presence rooted in clarity, and you become unforgettable. Power, like a blade, dulls with overuse. But kept sharp, hidden, and revealed only when necessary, it cuts through anything. That is the secret Napoleon forgot, And it's the one you must remember. Show less, mean more. That is how legends endure. Why rarity creates reverence. Some truths echo across time and continents. In ancient Japan, the samurai cultivated more than just martial skill. They embodied a principle known as yugen, a subtle, profound kind of beauty steeped in restraint and mystery. It wasn't about showing force or flaunting power. It was about leaving things unsaid, gestures incomplete, presence undefined. A true warrior didn't need to prove himself with every swing of the blade. He didn't need to roar or posture. His silence carried edge. His restraint evoked fear. In a culture where being seen could invite challenge, absence became sacred. The less he revealed, the more dangerous he became. And in that quiet, myth was born. You couldn't admire what you fully understood, but what you only glimpsed. That stayed with you. That haunted. This pattern isn't ancient history. It lives on. Look at the architects of modern influence. Elon Musk can vanish from public view for weeks, then reappear with a single tweet, and the world reacts. Markets shift. Conversations ignite. Not because he's constantly talking, but because he's not. Beyoncé disappears into creative silence, only to erupt with an unannounced album that resets the entire cultural conversation. No promo, no warning, just power. Their absence isn't neglect, it's strategy. They don't flood the world with noise. They create silence and then break it with precision. That's not luck. That's orchestration. And this dynamic isn't reserved for the powerful or the famous. It plays out in your daily life, in ways so subtle you often miss them. Text someone too often, and your presence becomes routine. Reply instantly every time, and your value starts to flatten. But pull back not to manipulate, but to breathe, to allow space for curiosity, for appreciation, for tension to build. When you're not always available, you become something to anticipate, not something to assume. Desire lives in distance. Longing grows in the pause. This isn't coldness, it's natural law. Even the sun, if it never set, would lose its beauty. Absence is not abandonment. It's contrast. It makes presence meaningful. And let's be clear, this isn't about arrogance. It's about alignment. It's about knowing that your time, your energy, your attention, these are sacred. When you offer them constantly, people forget that. But when you offer them with discernment, people remember. Space isn't a rejection. It's a message: you don't get all of me, not without purpose. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. That's emotional sovereignty. And it doesn't push people away. It draws the right ones in. In a world where everyone is broadcasting, shouting, constantly updating, the person who chooses silence, the one who appears not with desperation, but with intention, becomes magnetic, not because they beg to be seen, but because their absence makes others look. The Stoics taught that you must never be too eager to please. Epictetus said, "If you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid, because wisdom doesn't seek applause, it seeks depth. So does presence, and so should you. With every pause, with every boundary, with every deliberate step away, you give your presence weight. You don't become less seen, you become more felt. And that, in the end, is what power truly is, not how often you appear, but what happens when you do." The discipline of being missed. So how do you embody this wisdom, not just understand it, but live it? Start by reclaiming your time like it's sacred. Because it is. Say no, not as rebellion, but as a declaration of worth. Let some messages go unanswered. Resist the urge to be instantly available. Stop feeling the need to explain every step you take. Miss a gathering once in a while. Let your silence enter the room before you do, because when you step back intentionally, something interesting begins to happen. People start to lean in. That space you leave behind, it doesn't go unnoticed. It generates tension, and in that tension, presence begins to acquire weight. You're no longer just another person in the crowd. You're the person people wonder about. You become a question they want answered, a presence they begin to miss. This is not about manipulation. It's not a game. It's about redefining your relationship with yourself. You're not disappearing out of pride. You're stepping back out of self-respect. You're choosing to be intentional rather than impulsive. Because the truth is, when you give everyone unlimited access to your attention, you teach them that your time is cheap. But when you hold your presence like a rare element, precious, finite, and deliberate, people notice, and more importantly, they value it. Think of it this way. Don't just be the person who shows up. Be the one whose arrival means something. Speak when your words carry purpose. Move when your actions are grounded. Let your presence be an event, not a routine. This doesn't mean vanishing. It means being precise, strategic, powerful in your stillness. A Stoic doesn't chase applause. He doesn't react to every noise around him. He walks his path with calm, inner clarity, knowing that power doesn't scream, it waits. It doesn't beg, it radiates. And the world comes closer, not because you pulled it in, but because you gave it just enough distance to feel your gravity. So take a step back, create space. Stop trying to fill every silence. Let the world feel your absence long enough to appreciate your presence. Don't offer yourself like a commodity. Offer yourself like a force. People don't chase what they always have. They chase what they might lose. Be that rare thing. Not because you want attention, but because you finally understood you are worth the pause. You are worth the wait. Sometimes, the strongest move isn't stepping forward, it's stepping back. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to subscribe and stay connected to more wisdom like this. And in the comments, write "less is more" as a quiet reminder to yourself. You don't need to be everywhere to be remembered. You don't need to speak loudly to be heard. Power grows in stillness, and presence becomes priceless when it's rare. The next chapter will take you deeper into silence, strategy, and self-respect. Stay tuned.